Have you ever noticed how the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the least to say? Walk into any office meeting, scroll through social media, or sit through a dinner party, and you'll witness this phenomenon in real time. Those who possess genuine wisdom speak sparingly, while those drowning in their own emptiness cannot stop talking. This isn't coincidence. It's human nature revealing its most uncomfortable truth through what Arthur Schopenhauer understood as the theater of vanity. A performance where everyone fights desperately for the spotlight, never realizing that their very desperation is what makes them invisible to anyone who matters. Picture a world where everyone is simultaneously the star and the audience of their own movie. Vanity transforms ordinary life into exactly this kind of exhausting production, where each person writes themselves as the hero of every story, the expert in every conversation, the victim or victor of every circumstance that unfolds around them. Schopenhauer recognized that vanity springs from a terrifying void within the human soul. When we lack genuine substance, real knowledge, authentic experience, meaningful relationships, we become dependent on external validation, like an addict depends on their next fix. The emptier we are inside, the more desperately we need others to fill that space with their attention and admiration. But here's where it gets truly pathetic. The vain person doesn't even realize they're performing. They believe their own act so completely that they've lost touch with any authentic version of themselves. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to shine, every silence a threat to their carefully constructed image, every moment without attention, a small death of the ego. Watch them in action. They interrupt stories to tell better ones. They correct insignificant details to display superior knowledge. They take offense when they're not the center of attention, as if the world owes them constant recognition for simply existing. Behind all this theatrical behavior lies something Schopenhauer found both fascinating and repulsive: the absolute terror of being seen as ordinary. The German philosopher understood that vanity operates like a funhouse mirror, reflecting not who we actually are, but rather the distorted image of who we desperately wish we could be. In this constant distortion, we lose contact with reality itself, living inside a bubble of self-deception that requires constant feeding from the admiration of others. This creates what Schopenhauer recognized as the cruelest form of slavery, one where the chains are made of compliments and the prison bars are constructed from other people's opinions. The vain person cannot simply exist, they must constantly perform. They cannot show weakness, doubt, or vulnerability without feeling their entire identity crumbling. They live exhausted, maintaining a facade that bears no resemblance to their inner truth. What makes this particularly tragic is how vanity transforms every human interaction into a competition. The vain person cannot simply be present in a conversation. They're always calculating how to impress, how to stand out, how to steal the scene. They're not listening to understand. They're listening to find their next opportunity to perform. And here's the first cruel paradox that Schopenhauer discovered. The harder we try to impress others, the less impressive we become. The louder we proclaim our greatness, the smaller we appear. The more we demand recognition, the less worthy of it we prove ourselves to be. Vanity is an investment that always generates emotional bankruptcy. The most devastating part is that vain people rarely recognize this self-destructive pattern. They're so obsessed with maintaining their external image that they've completely severed the connection to their internal essence. They live like actors who have forgotten they're in a play, confusing their character with their actual identity, until the line between performance and reality disappears entirely. The true horror of vanity isn't found in its noise and spectacle, but in the quiet suffering it inflicts on those trapped within its web. Behind every person who constantly needs to prove their worth lives a soul at war with itself, fighting daily battles against an insecurity that seems impossible to overcome. Schopenhauer discovered that vanity feeds on the most toxic fuel imaginable: endless comparison with others. The vain person cannot simply live their life. They must live a life superior to everyone else's. They cannot achieve success. They must achieve more success than their peers. They cannot experience happiness. They must appear happier than everyone around them. This competitive mindset transforms existence into an insane race with no finish line. Every victory is temporary, every compliment insufficient, every achievement immediately followed by hunger for more. It's like trying to quench thirst by drinking salt water. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. The German philosopher recognized that this perpetual competition doesn't generate genuine excellence, but rather a corrosive anxiety that destroys any possibility of real contentment. Vain people are always looking over their shoulders, measuring themselves against others, never able to genuinely appreciate their own accomplishments because they're too busy worrying about whether someone else has accomplished more. But Schopenhauer uncovered something even more disturbing. Vanity transforms human relationships into instruments of personal validation. The vain person doesn't have real friends. They have an audience. They don't form genuine connections. They collect admirers. They don't love authentically. They use others as mirrors to reflect their own imagined magnificence. This instrumentalization of relationships creates profound and painful isolation. No matter how many people surround them, vain individuals live in devastating existential loneliness. They're never seen for who they truly are, only for the performance they present. They're never loved for their essence, only admired for their mask. The emotional weight of this double life is crushing. Maintaining a constant image is exhausting work that consumes all vital energy. Vain people live in perpetual vigilance, always monitoring how they're being perceived, always adjusting their performance, always fearing that their true nature will be discovered and found wanting. Schopenhauer identified that this constant surveillance prevents any genuine growth. How can someone learn who cannot admit ignorance? How can they evolve who cannot acknowledge their mistakes? How can they mature who are always pretending they've already reached their destination? Vanity functions like a golden prison where the bars are made of compliments, and the jailer is one's own ego. The more recognition a person receives, the more dependent on it they become. The more admiration they collect, the more addicted to it they grow. It's a downward spiral disguised as social ascension. The philosopher realized that vain people live within a cruel paradox. They desperately seek to be special, but this very seeking makes them utterly common. All vain individuals follow the same script, use the same tactics, reveal the same insecurities. In their attempt to stand out, they become predictable and monotonous. Even more devastating is recognizing that vanity robs people of the capacity to experience genuine joy. Every moment of pleasure gets contaminated by the need to display it. Every achievement gets diminished by the compulsion to compare it with others' achievements. Every experience gets filtered through the lens of external validation rather than internal satisfaction. What Schopenhauer found most tragic was watching intelligent, potentially remarkable people waste their entire lives chasing shadows. Instead of developing their actual capabilities, they spend all their energy maintaining an illusion. Instead of creating something meaningful, they exhaust themselves performing meaninglessness with great drama and fanfare. In our digital age, vanity has discovered its perfect playground for increasingly sophisticated experiments in self-deception. Never has it been easier to construct edited versions of ourselves. Never has it been more tempting to live for likes, comments, and instant validation. And never have we been, collectively, more anxious and dissatisfied, despite all the superficial connection technology promises to deliver. Schopenhauer would be both fascinated and horrified by our current moment. Social media platforms function like carnival mirrors that distort our image into 1,000 different reflections, each promising to show an improved version of who we are. But the philosopher already understood that these magical mirrors are cruel traps that imprison us in illusions increasingly distant from reality. The German thinker anticipated that vanity feeds on comparison, and our era offers an infinite buffet of comparisons. We can now measure our lives against millions of edited lives, our happiness against millions of carefully curated moments, our reality against millions of well-produced fantasies that bear no resemblance to actual human experience. This overload of comparisons creates chronic dissatisfaction that Schopenhauer would have immediately identified as vanity's poison in industrial doses. No matter what we accomplish, someone appears to have more. No matter how happy we feel, someone seems more radiant. No matter our success, someone appears to have traveled further down the path we're struggling to navigate. But the philosopher also discovered something revolutionary. There exists an escape from this golden prison. Freedom begins when we stop living for external approval and start living from our own internal essence. When we cease being actors in a play that never ends and become simply authentic human beings. Schopenhauer perceived that people who liberate themselves from vanity experience an extraordinary transformation. They can finally listen genuinely without planning their next impressive statement. They can admit ignorance without feeling paralyzing shame. They can celebrate others' success without the corrosive envy that destroys from within. This inner freedom generates magnetic presence that cannot be faked or manufactured. It's like the difference between a genuine diamond and artificial crystal. Both might sparkle, but only one possesses intrinsic value. Authentic people don't need to announce their authenticity. It's simply perceived by those with enough sensitivity to recognize it. The philosopher observed there exists rare elegance in those who choose to build in silence rather than merely comment with noise, to understand deeply rather than judge superficially, to grow internally rather than simply impress externally. These individuals aren't invisible, quite the opposite. They stand out precisely through their naturalness in an ocean of artificial performances. Schopenhauer understood that this transformation isn't a matter of privileged personality or special talent. It's a conscious and courageous decision to stop living for the audience and start living for what truly matters. It's choosing substance over appearance, depth over superficial shine, truth over social convenience. The Vanity of Fools reveals something deeper than simple weakness. It exposes the universal human terror of discovering we are imperfect, limited, mortal beings. But Schopenhauer unveiled a liberating paradox. When we stop fleeing this human condition and embrace it with courage, we find peace that no amount of external admiration could provide. People who free themselves from vanity discover inexplicable satisfaction in the simplicity of authentic existence. They no longer need constant applause to feel valuable. They no longer depend on external recognition to know who they are. They no longer live in perpetual competition with the rest of humanity, exhausting themselves in races that have no meaningful finish line. This represents true victory over vanity, no longer needing to defeat anyone else to feel good about yourself. No longer needing to prove anything to simply live. No longer needing a mask to face the mirror each morning and recognize the person looking back. The German philosopher showed us that a silent revolution awaits anyone willing to pay the price of radical honesty with themselves. It's the revolution of trading vanity's golden prison for the simple and powerful freedom of being genuinely human, flawed, real, and finally at peace with both our limitations and our authentic possibilities. In a world where everyone is screaming, "Look at me," there's profound power in those who choose to whisper, "I see you." In a culture obsessed with being impressive, there's magnetic attraction in those who choose to be interested. In an era of constant performance, there's revolutionary beauty in those brave enough to simply be themselves. So here's my question for you. When was the last time you did something without calculating how others would receive it? When did you last feel genuinely satisfied without needing to broadcast it to the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this perspective shifted something in how you see the hunger for recognition, and subscribe for more insights that might just transform how you understand human nature and yourself.